Welcome to episode 6 of the Sweaty Health Podcast. Today we're joined by Bobby Audley, a team culture and leader facilitator. He's done coaching, keynote speaking, as well as TED Talks. We're going to discuss today some topics that pertain to, personal responsibility, coaching, working past fear. But before we do all that, Bobby, could you just give us your own personal bio and what you're currently up to during the quarantine?
Of course. No, I appreciate being on the show. And my personal bio, as brief as possible, is, like you said, I do team culture and leadership development facilitation. When I say we, I have a business partner, Ryan Pinot, who's the name on the marquee of our group. We're the Pinot Training Group. And we work with, quite frankly, a lot of different industries: healthcare, banking, higher education, student leader development. And I have been very intentional about working with athletics. So we've worked with a lot of really cool Division I athletic programs, worked with the Team USA. And when we work with groups, it is in a training environment. You and I have talked about why I love the word facilitation. I believe we're facilitating the team coming together in a really awesome, connected way, which also sparked the podcast that I have, 50 Cups of Coffee, was the TEDx talk I did of just connecting, sitting down with 50 people in a year to connect and learn and grow and just get to know more people and widen your network. And I've been doing this work for almost 10 years. My former company before joining Pinot Training Group was Outside the Zone, where the whole kind of focus, I thought that was a super creative company name for the concept of stepping out of your comfort zone, doing things that force you to grow, doing things that challenge you. And so I've been in this line of work for, like I said, almost a decade. And during quarantine, we are doing our best to serve our clients via Zoom. We are not your online guys. We are not putting together some online prepackaged program that'll take you through our concepts. Not that that's bad. That's just not our strength. Sure. Our strength is engaging. So we've been hopping on Zoom calls with the teams that we work with, walking them through some questions that we could probably talk about in this call. And then also, quite frankly, serving other groups that have never worked with us, but are looking to find ways to connect and engage their people during this time where we are socially distanced. And other than that, I'm doing podcasts and I started a Instagram TV series. If you're listening, you can't see my air quotes. I don't really know what I'm doing with it. I'm literally just putting together videos.
That's cool though. You just gotta keep creating, and that's really why we started this podcast. And like I told you, when we started thinking about who we wanted to come on here, I quickly thought of you. But if obviously you guys don't know, Bobby and I played lacrosse in college, and we grew to become friends, and it's 10 years later and we're still talking to each other, which is absolutely great. And, though we may not be in the same exact realm of business, we still do very similar things. And, what I'd like to ask from you is why, like, if I was a head coach to a certain team, why am I hiring Bobby? What are you providing them besides, motivating them? What are you doing for them that allows them to maybe be a better person or be a better team, right? Because I've been on so many different teams, and I've been lucky enough to be on teams that win. And I've been on teams where we thought we were going to be state champs, and we got to the playoffs, and all of a sudden it became like, holy shit, I don't know if we're going to win this game or not. And, I'm sure you deal with plenty of coaches and teams that are in situations like that and other types of situations.
No, I think that's a perfect frame up to the question. It's obviously a great question. It's the question. If I can't answer this question, then I'm not worth my salt. And it's a great frame up, because we always say, in the world of sports specifically, we do not promise outcomes. We are not outcome focused. And that's not a cop-out. That's a reality, that there are so many factors that play into whether your team wins at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. And you could even argue that shouldn't be your overarching mission, is wins and losses. It really should be focused on kind of the values that you're bringing to the team. And I can get into all those kind of cliche answers, but the reality is this. When we work with a team, we promise what we call confidence, connection, and culture. Walking that backwards, it's creating a powerful, positive peak performance team culture where your players are, number one, happy. They love to play the sport. I was working with a team about 2-3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago now. They're at the time top 10 Division I volleyball program, and I looked at them and said, are you guys like halfway through the day? I could just recognize they weren't having fun. And are you having fun with volleyball? And they all looked at me like I was an idiot. They're like, no, like this is a job. This is what we have to do. It's what, like, we're here to win. We're here to perform. And I said, I go, well, if I can argue, that's why I'm here, as your coach is recognizing that you're kind of half-assing this. You're going through the motions of it. And so you haven't created a culture of, we're here to have fun. And fun isn't screwing around and laughing. Fun is working your butt off. Fun is committed to a goal. Fun is getting better. So that's getting them bought in on the culture. And then the connection and confidence side of things, as I always say, we want people to be more connected. Well, they're not connected because they're not confident enough to do it. I don't think we need icebreakers. I don't think if you get together in a human knot and you get yourself out of it, all of a sudden you're connected.
Yeah.
We always make the joke about trust falls. If someone does a trust fall and you catch them, it doesn't mean you trust them. It means you're a decent human being and you don't want them to fall on their face.
Yeah.
And so we attack it from a place of, confidence is two things. Number one, do you trust yourself? Number two, do you trust the people around you? I had an athlete who one time I could just tell, we do these challenges in our day that asks you to, like, so we use public speaking as a tool quite a bit because public speaking for a lot of people is the number one fear. And why don't we love public speaking? Maybe you don't trust your own voice. But if you trust your own voice, maybe you think the people in your audience are going to roll their eyes at you, laugh at you, judge you, whatever. So she's kind of going through the motions with this speech. And I say to her, do you trust yourself? And she goes, yes. Like, she's offended I asked her. And I go, do you trust your teammates? And she goes, no. Like, no hesitation. And I was like, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And so we unpacked that she's the individual in the group that's constantly the butt of jokes. When she takes risks, they roll their eyes at her. She's a underclassman looking to take an upperclassman's position on the team. She can feel that the upperclassmen don't like that. And so, like, when we come in, if you were to come into a team culture workshop and you don't address that, then you're wasting your time. So our promise to coaches is, we are going to address that. We are going to ensure that every player on the team is confident in who they are, number one. We build that individual confidence, but then also connected to their teammates in a way that they trust them and they know that their teammates trust them in return. You don't have to be best friends, and you do have to have a sense of trust for the goal of creating a culture where that's just the way you do things. So you look at Duke basketball, whether you graduated last year or 20 years ago, you're a part of this fraternity of Duke basketball because Coach Hay has created a sense of this is just how we do things here.
Yeah.
And so that's the goal in culture, is to create that so that it lives for a long time.
You have the pride of being that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Amazing.
So it comes through that. That's incredible stuff. And I think everything works off each other, but it's almost like you start by building the confidence that creates a better culture. And then there's just an incredible connection between everybody. I can make so many parallels to what we do, Scott. As far as how this works, just gaining.
I mean, go on, start with one, because I think a lot of what he's saying relates.
Yeah. So the whole idea of confidence, just building confidence in yourself. So many people start out ambivalent and they just want to do something, but they don't feel like they can do it. I think for a lot of people that we work with, especially when they're first starting, we become their confidence. They work through us and we coach them along and say, you can do this. In the past, a lot of times they'll take on too much. They'll try to do a 10-day cleanse. It's just way over. I'm going to just do keto. They're putting big restrictions on themselves. You just have to learn how to, have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, whatever it may be. Simple goals that are one step above where they need to be. So we build the confidence to say, you can do this. I'm going to help you along with it. As they go on, their confidence goes up. And then we can build into other things. If we start with that as a starting point, building confidence in themselves through the coach, how does that pertain now to culture? Would culture be like, get them in the gym, get them into that energy of a gym, get them some friends that are kind of committed to doing this. Like, you know, how can we parallel this for the listeners to kind of figure out what does this mean for someone that's maybe first starting exercise, where the confidence, and then we're
right
into kind of a cultural idea.
Well, this is where and jump in and steer me in a different direction if I'm off base of what you're asking. But as I think about
a little all over the place too, so
no, it's good.
Provide clarity.
So you mentioned the gym as an example. We worked with a gym in Rockford, Illinois, and they wanted us to come in and basically do the same training that we do with an athletic team, because they were looking to create an environment where it's called Max P. I was trying to remember the name of it, Max P. They're trying to create an environment where a culture within their gym, so that, you know, when we work with a team, we say your players will reach the lowest expectation that you set. You set the bar. Right? Yes, we want player-led. And as a team, Harry Swain said this in one of my podcast interviews. He goes, with the Ravens, we set the bar of what it means to be a part of this organization, a part of this team. And we don't lower it for anybody. We don't lower it so you can walk over it. Sure. We empower you to reach that bar. And so I look at a gym, and my goal in joining a gym would be to say, if I know what my goals are, I want to join an environment when I come in, there's an expectation for how you work when you're in this environment. There's an expectation for how I show up. Ross, you said that you are the confidence for people at times. And it's like, yeah, that's how it starts. That's why you need a coach. You sign up with Ross to say, like, I don't know what to do, and maybe I know what to do. I can Google the right workouts, and I need someone to hold my feet to the fire and hold me accountable. You're going to be my confidence in that moment until I have been built up and empowered enough where I have enough experiences over time. Talk about creating habits. Depending on the study you read, you know, the Power of Habit book says it's 45 to 90 days. There's another book that says it's 180 days. Bottom line, it's a long time to consistently build this up until all of a sudden your identity is no longer someone that isn't in shape and doesn't work out. You become someone who, this is who you are. In the same way that a team says, this is how we are, this is who you are, you're someone who works out. Even during this quarantine time, I hate working out from home. I love the energy of a gym. I love the accountability of a trainer. And like, no one cares that I hate working out from my body isn't concerned that I hate working out from home. I have to work out from home right now. And so because it's been, you know, years and years and years of me having an identity of someone who works out and is in shape and eats healthy, then I'm maintaining that now because it's who I believe I am. If you believe that you are not that, and we see that with teams, right? I worked with a Division I team a couple of years ago. There's a good example. Rutgers Athletics, when they joined the Big Ten, they said there was a big challenge with some of their current players who didn't sign up to be Big Ten athletes. Some of them embraced it. Some of them were excited about it. Some of them took on the challenge, and some of them decided to go elsewhere because they did not sign up to be Big Ten athletes, because it's a difference from where they were. I think it was the Big East. Mm-hmm. So I think that side of things matters. You're gonna get clients who love the expectation you set as trainers and as a gym, and you're gonna get clients that don't, and maybe they're better off somewhere else.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, there's been so many times where, and we talk about building wins under our clients' belts all the time. We need to build these small wins so that they can gain the confidence so that they can know that they can do it. And us as coaches, we are the ones who are holding them accountable, right? And then you get the kind of person who's like, I could start with you as soon as I lose this next 10 pounds, I'll start with you. Or, you know, let me wait until this cools down and then I'll start with you. And those are the types of people that I know are listening and who are still struggling to get started, who are still struggling to figure out where their starting line even is. Or maybe they have had 10 different other starting lines and they just haven't had the right plan to move forward. And I think what it comes down to is saying, it's okay if I outsource this starting action, or if I outsource this plan to someone else to hold me accountable, to help me build this confidence. And I think that's what a lot of coaches for you might do in order to help build the culture around a team. Am I right?
Yeah. yeah, and if I can, when I think of the individual who might say, well, I want to make sure I lose this extra 10 pounds before I start with you, I think of vulnerability. And I think there's a lot of coaches that there's a big vulnerability in reaching out to an outside source and saying, I'm not great at this thing. I need your help with it. Mm-hmm. And that is what I found is the coaches that reach out to us there. I just had a call 2 days ago of a coach saying, I've been coaching for 15 years. He said this, coaching for 15 years. It took a lot for me to acknowledge I need help with culture, mm-hmm. because isn't that what I'm supposed to be doing? Yeah. Is building culture. Mm-hmm. And so I think the same is true for people looking to get in shape. It's like, I had a mentor years ago who said, don't be afraid to do things you suck at. Like, don't be afraid to do things you're not good at. And yeah. I think signing up for a trainer, I know myself. I've had some injuries in the past year, and there's been times where I'm like, I'm not ready to go back to the gym yet because I'm kind of inside. I'm a little embarrassed of how the shape that I'm in, and it's kind of getting over that and saying, you know what, like that's the purpose of seeking help. That's the purpose of finding a coach or finding someone to help you through this and have that vulnerability.
I think having that, and just because you're asking for help doesn't mean it's a sign of weakness. I think it's a sign of strength, because you've actually but you've actually been able to pinpoint exactly where you can get better at, right? And by maybe not fully giving it all to that coach, but meaning like let them do everything, you're still putting in the work, right? It's not like it's a sign of weakness saying, as a coach of 15 years, saying, I need help with this culture. It's saying, I'm just trying to make this team better. And you know what? As an individual, we have individuals who are, $1 million clients, $1 billion clients, and they're incredible at what they do. And then there's this side of them where they've completely kind of put to the side and not cared about, because they have a family, they have a business, and then they have themselves, and they put themselves last. They don't make themselves a priority. And we still know in the back of their mind, they're like, shit, this summer, all these guys are going to be in the pool, and I got to go into the pool, and I'm not going to be looking good. Or, I'm at work. We got our new photos for the website coming up, and I'm going to be sticking in the background. They're thinking that. I know they are. And it's totally okay to say, you know what, I'm a really successful individual in what I do. Let me hire a coach to help me continue getting better in that department.
Well, and to your point, Scott, this is going to sound overly self-serving and salesy, what I'm about to say, but it is the God's honest truth. When we've been doing this, I've been doing this work for 9 years. Ryan's been doing it for like 15, 16. Mm-hmm. And we met 4 years ago. And part of why we partnered is I specifically loved his program that he was doing, Heart of a Leader, and wanted to bring a version of it to athletics. Not the same thing, but let's tweak it and bring it to athletics. And so naturally, we reached out to what we believed were the low-hanging fruit in the market, which were maybe some smaller programs you've never heard of. And on top of that, we started reaching out to programs that we felt needed help. So poor cultures or losing teams or you name it, and struck out completely, right? And what happened was a top program, it was actually a Division III program, but they were like third in the country for basketball, reached out. And when I was working with them, I realized this coach, I didn't need to sell him at all. Like, he just embraced everything. And so I had a crazy idea. I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger in his book said when he became an actor, he went right for the top. He said, I want to be the star of the movie. And what he found is it was a less crowded space to compete, because most people are competing kind of in the middle. Maybe they're refusing the low end gigs, but they're competing for the middle, thinking I'll build my way to the top. And so he ends up getting top roles pretty quickly because he just went for them. And so I said to Ryan, I was like, we should just start reaching out to like UNC, Maryland, Purdue, Alabama. Like, let's just see what happens. And it worked. Because what I realized is, some of the best coaches and most successful programs in the country are able to admit that this is an area I need growth in, and they're willing to seek that help. Texas A&M women's soccer is one of the most successful soccer programs in the history of soccer. And this is why I said it's going to sound salesy and self-serving. I'm not name dropping. I am floored that
You have the opportunity.
Yeah, I sat down with their coach at the soccer convention a few months ago, and within literally after our conversation, he goes, "How soon can we do this?" Like our sales cycle was an hour, and we started working with it. He was so convicted and just like, you know what, like he had nothing to get over personally. It was just like, yep, this is what our team needs right now, so let's do it. And that's turned into a lesson that I share with everybody I work with or speak to is we work with the top teams, not because we're so great. It's because the top teams are seeking help. Mm-hmm. And that's true of top individuals. That's true of
people. I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, that is a complete characteristic of a ideal client is that they look to you for guidance. They're sold on the idea of being coached. And my most successful clients, and Scott, I'm sure you can attest to this, and Bobby, same thing, are the people that are most willing to learn from you, listen to you, and execute, whatever you say. These are the foundations. Now, how you mentioned before you're starting to do Zoom calls with everything that's going on with COVID-19. How is this changing, like the connection between you and the coach, teammates together, coaches to teammates? We're going through something interesting now, even between us and our clients, where we're trying to reach out. We're kind of in limbo. We might be back soon. How are you building a connection with your current clientele and your athletes?
Well, I'll tell you how I'm doing it, and then I'll tell you how it's going. So how we're doing it is purely, so I worked with, so far I have 5 teams where I've been consistently on Zoom calls with them. And the Zoom call, the first one I did, we got on and, there's 30 players and the coaches are on it too. And I do a 15-minute, basically, I call it a sales pitch to say when we worked, and these are all teams I've worked with, when we have worked together, we defined what it means to be a part of this team. And one of our core pillars is we have difficult conversations. So if someone is doing something you're not happy with, you talk to them about it. You don't talk behind their back about it. If someone isn't living up to the commitments that you've set as a team, you talk to them about it. You hold them accountable. And if you're being talked to, don't take it personally. Don't get defensive. This person's trying to make you better. If you disagree, have that conversation. We do a lot in our in-person workshops on how to receive feedback, how to give feedback, how it helps us grow. So I do that reminder in the beginning to say, right now, difficult conversations are harder than they've ever been, right? If I have a problem with Scott, if I see him in person, it might be more comfortable to be like, hey man, I know there's been some tension over text or phone, but we need to talk about this. Yeah. And if we aren't going to see each other in person for 3 months, I'm probably just going to avoid it.
Yeah.
And not talk about it because it's more comfortable to do it that way.
But you're going to keep thinking about it,
Oh yeah. And it's going to impact my texts and my calls and anything. And so I said, make sure you're having those conversations. And the feedback I'm getting from coaches is their number one challenge right now is 1, 2, 3, or 4 players on a 30-person team who just aren't responding to messages, aren't responding to emails, aren't showing up to team meetings on Zoom, and they don't know what to do about it. Mm-hmm. What do you do about it? And so I'm putting it on the players to say it's on you, not even just captains, you as players, to make sure you're having these difficult conversations. And then after that, I get into the content. And so I'm building these as I go. The first Zoom, the question I asked everybody was, think of someone you admire and why do you admire them or look up to them? And what happened was it generated a conversation of people talking about, some players said, I admire my parents or my dad or my mom because they're essential workers right now and they're going to work every day and they're not complaining about it. They're staying level-headed. I admire my older brother because, when he was in college, he had an ACL tear, but he still got back on the field or you name it. And what happened, this was my hope and it worked out, that we admire people that deal with adversity. Mm-hmm. We always admire people that deal with adversity. It doesn't mean that you have to deal with adversity to earn my respect. But when I use the word admire, we admire people that go through challenge, that go through adversity, come out of it the other end, are positive and level-headed about it. And so every single time, hands down, everyone you admire has dealt with adversity. And so I say to them, you right now are dealing with adversity. being at home, quarantined, your season's canceled, your off season's canceled. How are you responding to it? Are you responding in a way that 5, 10, 15 years down the road, someone that looks up to you is on a call like this and they bring up your name? Is your name being brought up because of how you're acting right, how you're showing up right now? Yeah. And that's it. That's the Zoom call. That was session 1, and I'm doing a session 2 with a number of teams and building that out. A lot of my focus is on that, just kind of, this is where I know I laugh about the motivation, inspiration side of this gig, but it's a big part of it to get people to take their own action and responsibility.
Totally. And you know what? You're talking about having those difficult conversations, and we all have put ourselves in situations where we've had to make that difficult conversation and we feel so uncomfortable. And the time leading up to that point, we feel so uncomfortable, and it's like the worst feeling in the world. And then you have it, and you're like, oh, the weight of the world is off your back, and you feel so much better. And it's that time before leading up to it that makes it so hard to make that starting point, to have a conversation, or to actually start whatever the hell it is that you're starting. And it's so funny, like we hear all the time, and especially obviously from, your previous work, you said, outside the zone, when we put ourselves in those uncomfortable situations, we spoke about this before. For myself, I know that is opened up doors everywhere else. And it's hard to continue to remember that it happens. It still is going to happen. It's going to feel better, because that feeling of whether it's anxiety or whatever you're feeling prior to that, making that decision, is so strong that you forget everything that you've done and you're just thinking about what you're feeling. I feel like it's that we need to figure out how to get past, how to keep getting past and continue doing, because it's only going to get better it's only going to open up doors. It's only going to make things better for your team, yourself, you and your family, whatever it may be. And I think that's kind of one of the keys to why you are so successful, is that you help teams and kids do that.
Yeah, and it's repetition with that, because it never goes away. In my TEDx talk, I quoted Transformers, the movie, but I freaking love the line of Megatron. I'm not even a huge Transformers fan. I think I've seen the movie once, but it's the end of the movie, and the Shia LaBeouf character is like running away from Megatron, and Megatron goes, "Is it fear or courage that compels you?" Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I've Googled it to see like if someone more like interesting said that line, but I can attribute it to.
It can't be Transformers.
So I'll just leave it with Transformers. But I think it's fantastic. I used to have that on my wall in college after I saw that movie, because I think that's so true. In those moments when you have that gut feeling, are you allowing the fear or the courage to make your decision for you? And that, the 50 cups of coffee challenge for me was originally that. If you watch my TEDx talk, I say in the talk that it's about connection, and in reality, the rest of the 20-minute talk is about the psychology behind taking the challenge on or not. And that's because at that time, that's really where I was at and what I was focused on. The talk itself has taken on much more of the connection focus, and so that's where the podcast has come from. Mm-hmm. And in reality, it's not a really unique idea. It's not a new idea. No. And it's just, the question is, for me, sitting down with coffee or talking to people on the phone is what I enjoy to do. And so it's something I enjoy that still makes me nervous, that still is uncomfortable. And so if you continually do that, then you're continuing to expand that comfort zone. So for you, maybe it's not coffee. Maybe it's not talking to people. Maybe it's going to the gym. Maybe it's working with a trainer. Maybe it's going for a run in the morning. I don't know. But something for you that is a filler and is still difficult to do. I have moments all the time where, when I first met Harry Swain, this guy, 4-time Super Bowl champion, player engagement director for the Ravens, agrees to get coffee with me because we had a mutual connection. And I remember sitting in my car, I've told him the story, and my stomach is just in total knots because I'm like, what? Like partially looking for an out. Like, maybe I just text him and be like, there was traffic. And I thought to myself, like, man, like this is what everybody goes through. And
dude, I go through that every day with something. There's always a reason for me to look for an out. It's just a matter of getting past that stomach.
Push past it. And it doesn't always mean it's good on the other end. Maybe you walk out of the meeting and say, that sucked. And it's like, okay, whatever, but you're still alive. You're still here. Keep finding those extra meetings.
But there's definitely like unintended consequences to taking action in spite of fear. I almost see it as like fear is, it's kind of the arrow pointing at the thing you don't want to do, but courage is like taking those steps to just say, I'm going to do it. I think understanding that there's a potential bad consequence, there's a good one, but there's also, like you said, Scott, going into group fitness, there's unintended consequences that we have to understand by taking this action. There's things that we're not comprehending that will positively benefit us. And sometimes it is something like, wow, I'm never doing that again. Cause that's
right.
And that's okay. Like we have to learn from that. Sometimes our decisions are not good. We're like, I fear this. Well, it was good you feared it because it wasn't the right thing to do. Now you officially know because you put yourself through it. But I think so often the greatest things that happen to us in life are when we take that dive, we go into something that we're absolutely frightened of, we get past it, and maybe it's not that specific thing, but it's something else that comes from just being able to do that. And once again, just trying to tie it back to everything that's going on now. I mean, there's still a lot of people, many people that are living in a little bit of fear. This is very scary for a certain portion of the population that's older and unhealthy. And even for people that are healthy, I have clients that are in perfect health and they're just on lockdown. They're not going out at all. They're not going shopping. Everything's coming into the house. They haven't left their house in like, what is it, about 6 weeks in?
Yeah.
So, and maybe that's not a great example. Maybe now is the time to say, I'm going to go shopping. And, then you end up getting it. But there's an innate risk to everything we do. There's a little fear with maybe everything associated with what we're going to do in the day, or maybe risk. Risk is probably the better word. And we just have to, weigh the options of what's worth taking.
I think it's always better to know rather than to say what if, right? When it comes down to it. Because we talk about this a lot in the podcast. Someone has something on their mind. They've wanted to make some form of a change for quite a while, right? Maybe they've been researching it the past 6 months. Maybe they've been thinking about it the past 6 years, but they haven't started because of that fear, that feeling, because they don't have the confidence. And I think it's so much better because what you're saying is, it's all about that repetition. Keep doing it. They probably do that in so many other departments of their life. But when it comes down to this one thing to make this change that they've been thinking about for so long, they can't seem to do it. But when you think about it, it's always better to know than to say, what if?
Yeah. And I think, as I think about right now, I think really what a really important concept is, there's a book called How Full Is Your Bucket? And there's actually a kid's version of it that explains it really well. I always laugh. I saw Lou Holt speak one time, and he said, you know why my book is 300 pages? Because the publisher said it had to be 300 pages. I think a lot of times we can explain concepts in about 12 pages, but we make it longer. So I'm explaining the concept right now, and you should still read the book. It comes from the theory of margins that says all of us have an energy tank going through the day. That allows us to take action and make decisions and respond and react, you name it. And when our tank is full and abundant, the biggest thing can happen, and it doesn't set us off. If your tank is full, you got a lot going on, you feel abundant, you got a lot of wins in your life, you could get in a car accident on the way to work, you're not injured, and it doesn't bother you. You know what? Hey, I'm blessed, I'm grateful, everything's good. You can get in a fight with your spouse, and you can sit back and say, you know what? Quarantine is causing us to just have some friction. Let's settle this down. We're going to be okay. But if your tank is drained, if you are just like, you've had the worst day, you've got no wins, you haven't taken care of your mental health at all, the smallest thing can set you off. Your spouse can suggest something for dinner and you can be like, you know, I hate that meal. What is wrong with you? And it just pisses you off. And so we talk about this to say, we talk about this in general to say, when we talk about bringing energy and positivity, be aware of how you're taking care of yourself, what you're doing to fuel yourself, how you're taking care of your mental state. And to Ross's point, you know, people are definitely fearful of getting this virus, and maybe that's a good thing because we don't want people to get it.
Yeah.
And how are you taking care of your mental state? How are you filling your bucket? And be intentional about it. For me, filling my bucket is in-person conversations, going to the gym, large events. Like, I am your token extrovert. And so like I have to be more intentional about it right now, to say maybe going for a run or just being outside a little bit, having more phone conversations like this, being intentional, noticing when my bucket's kind of drained. My wife and I, like, you know, Danielle, like we've started. At first, she didn't love like that I would use like this type of language. She's like, don't use your trainer language at home. And I'm like, no, like this is like real stuff, to the point where like 2 days ago, I was pretty short tempered. And she legit was like, do you need to fill your bucket? And I was like, yes, yes, I do.
And then you get mad at her for calling you out.
Yeah. And so, and like right now, you know, like, again, you know, if getting out is what you need to do to fill your bucket, then the grocery store might be your only option. Put your mask on, put the gloves on, go to the grocery store, come home, sanitize everything, take a shower, like wash your clothes, do what you need to do.
I think
mental health is important now.
Yeah,
too.
Definitely. What it comes down to, and what you're saying, is that know what your thing is that helps you clear your mind. And if you feel like that bucket is getting lower and lower, you better get out there and do that thing. If you can't right now because of quarantine, you need to find a version of that in order to at least fill your bucket back up.
Yeah, and be super intentional. It comes down, I think, you know, if there's a theme to this episode at all, it's intentionality. It's saying like, you know what, I'm going to be aware. If I don't feel motivated, if I don't feel like taking action, if I feel scared of the change, how do I take responsibility for changing that? There's I don't know where I got this line, but it's, don't always listen to yourself, talk to yourself. Too often and it's good to reflect, and too often we listen to ourselves instead of talking to ourselves, and us being the motivator to say, I'm going to do something different here.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. I think it comes down to it. And when you're talking about like talking to yourself, there's, especially during quarantine when there's not much human connection, you're almost stuck in a room with the voice in your head who you're talking to for much longer than you typically been talking to.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's a great thing because, you know, look what's happened with Ross and I. We've gotten much more creative than we had been. We have a little bit more time now, obviously, but, you know, we're doing things that we've been putting off for quite some time. And, you know, that was part of the first episode that we started was, you know, we had been putting some things off because we've been so busy. And, you know, in our mind, we're talking to ourselves, oh, we'd love to start a podcast. We'd love to get creative. We'd love to do this. We'd love to coach online. We'd love to, whatever it may be. And finally, we now have the time to talk to ourselves a little bit more and hash it out and brainstorm, and now finally take the action and starting. And I think that's really what it comes down to is, you know, being intentional with your time, right? If you're going to create some form of routine, make sure there's some intention behind what you're going to do rather than just going through the motions.
Yeah, I mean, we're a month into it, depending on where you live, and I'd be willing to bet a lot of people haven't paused yet to say, let's be aware of the new routine, the new normal. If you get a new job, you establish a new routine, a new drive to work, maybe a new time you got to get up, a new time you get home. Maybe that impacts when you pick up the kids from school, you name it. You take time. Usually people take 2 weeks to say, I'm going to, before I start the new job, transition. Everyone has started a new job, regardless of, you know, maybe it's the same responsibility, same employer, but you're doing it in a different way. And have you taken time to pause and establish the new way, or are you just allowing yourself to get caught in the flow?
And eventually what happens is that bucket gets lower and lower and lower, and you'll start to, it'll get empty, and then something's going to happen,
Well, it gets, I would assume it gets harder to get your bucket full, because you're just in a constant state of like reaction. It's an uncomfortable zone just being in this experiencing this pandemic and having to change in schedule. So if you don't have some level of routine in your life, if you're not waking up around the same time, if you're, not scheduled, if you have kids doing the homework, if everything is chaotic every single day, there's going to be no sense of self. Taking time for yourself to exercise, that's going to be the last thing on your mind. And that's why that's such a great point, Bobby, that we need to just fill that bucket up first, make sure it's like that, and then it will be much easier to do things. You'll have much better focus for yourself and your goals, so you can actually make progress in a crazy time. And that's exactly what we spoke about in our first podcast, was putting together rituals that are sustainable for quarantine. And then on top of that, taking time for yourself, addressing things and going after something maybe you've been pushing off for a while, whether it's weight loss. For us, maybe it's doing a podcast. And for yourself, it's maybe developing a new system of coaching, right, through Zoom that you can use in the future if you can't make it to be there in person. This could be we're just seeing opportunity where a lot of people might see problems. That's kind of another topic I guess we could even go into, is like how you're framing things. People see negativity, people see positivity in the same
exact thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're 100%. I mean, it's funny, the first time I did a Zoom with a team. So I did a Zoom with a team I've never worked with before, and the coaches appreciated it. They liked it. And I walked away and said, yeah, as soon as this thing goes away, I'm never doing that again. Like it's great for now. And as soon as we're allowed to be in person, that first interaction is best in person for me. And maybe that'll change as I get better at it. However, to your point, Ross, I did this kind of, I would call it a follow-up session with a team we've worked with, which we probably wouldn't even necessarily do, but I just felt the need to serve. And I walked away and I was like, this was fantastic. It was an hour of my day. I did it from home. We should do this all the time anyways. And so you're right. It created a new opportunity to say, we're going to do this. And for me, to your point of opportunity versus challenge, I've torn both my Achilles tendons in the past 3-4 years. Wow. And we can get into that on a more technical podcast. But I bring it up because the first time I tore it, I used it as I signed up for a Tough Mudder race immediately to say I'm going to get over this. I'm going to train. I'm going to get back at it. And I did. A year and a half later, I did the physical therapy, you name it, got back at it. Tore my other one, completely unrelated, playing pickup basketball. And a lot of people in my life were like, well, maybe your athletic days are over. Your sports days are over, pick up golf or pick up something else. And I had a moment, I was actually just kind of just sitting and thinking. And I thought to myself, this will not be my story. My story will not be, I used to be an athlete and then I got injured twice and I became a chess player. That's just not my story. And so in this time, Ryan and I hopped on a call as soon as Black Tuesday for us, when all of our events canceled and we didn't know what the future held. And he said it. He goes, this reminds me of what you said, when you got hurt, when you said this won't be our story. He goes, this will not be our story. Our story will not be, we used to run this really cool business and then COVID-19 happened. Our story will be, we got creative. We found new ways to serve. We opened new markets, you name it. And so I think that's good for people right now. You're seeing a lot, and I can have humor, so I'm not calling out people that are posting every day about drinking all day, but you can see the memes of, for some people, their story is sweet, I'm gonna open up a bottle of wine at lunchtime now, and other people's story is, I got all the time in the world to work out and get better and start the podcast. And you define it, you know, maybe for you, opening a bottle of wine at lunchtime is cool for a story. I don't give a shit. You do you. And
you know, what's so funny that you say that is that you didn't want that to be your defining moment. I once created a Facebook group, and the title of the group, I'm looking at it right now, is I used to be an athlete. Now I'm out of shape and overweight. That was the title of the group. Because I know there are people like that. Yeah, there are people who let that story be them. And you were there. You had the wherewithal to say, that's not going to be me. And I don't want that story to be me. And sometimes people can't, they don't notice that is slowly becoming their story. I let my job take control of my life for the first 20 years of my marriage. And now I'm finally out of shape. I got kids. I'm into my job. I'm good with business. And that's why they come to us. And we're totally grateful for those types of situations, but there's those other people who don't reach out, and that's, I think that's a absolutely great point. And what Ross was saying is some people look at the situation that we're in and think to themselves this couldn't be any worse. And then other people will look at themselves and like, wow, there's so many different areas of opportunity for you. I just noticed, I saw this the other day, I'll share it with you guys, is I know, Gary Vee is Gary Vee, but he posted this the other day. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Right. So it's, you choose what you get to look at: positivity, gratitude, growth. It's a picture of a kid on a bus. On one side, it's all positive. The other side is negativity, failure, and regret. And it's the same kid, right? It's the same person. And it's just a matter of how do you make that choice, Right. And I think when it comes to, thinking about yourself in a certain situation and maybe feeling that regret or that anxiety to make that change, it's a matter of knowing, if I just keep repeating myself, putting myself in that uncomfortable situation, pushing further, only good things will come of it.
I love how, and I don't know if this was super intentional of the cartoon, but I love how it's the same kid. Because maybe too often those things are framed up as, positive guy versus negative guy. And it's like, we're both, right?
Yeah.
We all have our days. It's those of us that are intentional about how we look at things. And it doesn't mean we're naive. Ryan and I last week were talking about how we as a business are kind of now, we've worked with some cool athletic programs and we're starting to get some traction with that. And because of that, some corporate groups have reached out purely because athletic stories are cool and compelling. And so it's like, can you talk at our, quarterly meeting about what you're teaching UNC athletics? And it's like, heck yeah, that'd be awesome. And all of that just came to a halt. And to sit there and say, let's find the opportunity. And yes, we're doing that. And like a week or so ago, he and I both were just like, and this sucks, right? And it's like, it's my dad asked me, he's like, are you stressed out right now from a business side of things? And I go, stress isn't the right word, because, we're blessed and abundant and Danielle has a job. And so it's not like we're a household that depends on entrepreneurship only. Mm-hmm. And I said, the word is sad. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but the word is sad. I had a lot I was looking forward to this spring and summer and fall, and it looks like that's not going to happen. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be upset, but don't sit in it and don't let that make your decisions for you. Don't get sad and then quit and not take action.
Don't let that create your decision. Don't let those emotions create your decision, because you have that other side of you. And when you let the sad part make the decision, it's probably not your best choice.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, who's winning? That's what it is, because we all have that negative chatter in our heads, and some of us are geared more toward that versus being that overly positive person that we might find if we went to one of the bigger human performance experts, where everything's like, yeah, jumping up and down, high fives. Like we were talking before about some of our experiences. it almost isn't genuine. I understand the concept of fake it till you make it, but sometimes you need to experience, a little bit of highs and lows. And I know from my own perspective, I share with you, Bobby, that I don't like working out at home. I'm not enjoying this process of, having a very small garage gym and then being forced to go outside when it's still a little bit cold in New York.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly pushing myself into that uncomfortable zone. I don't enjoy it, but it's a part of who I am. So I do it. My days, some days I'm up and down and it's tough to snap out of, but I think we all have to, especially now, have certain strategies to recognize when we're being triggered to go in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Because it's good to be smart about keep this going. But when are we starting to let that negative chatter in our head take over and it's making us less productive from what we need to be doing during the day? It's changing our direction from where we want to go to where we don't want to go. Do you have any, strategies that you can think of offhand to instantly recognize it, change direction, something along the lines of that?
Yeah, what I teach is just change, do something different. If you are finding yourself just zoomed out, right? You're on Zoom all day, and the reality of video chat and face chat is, I was reading the other day from a therapist who was saying, there was a blog post about how you can experience cognitive dissonance via video chat, which means your brain is seeing, I'm having a conversation right now with Ross and I don't feel anything, right? Like I see you, but I'm not getting the endorphin rush that comes from being in person with someone. And so for me personally, I'll be an entire day on Zoom and at the end of it, I'm drained, I'm exhausted, I'm short of patience. And I don't know why, because I'll go an entire day dealing with, having a workshop with individuals and feel alive at the end of it. And so it's recognizing, okay, I'm being drained by that. So my change is being more intentional about my schedule. And I understand, maybe you're listening to this thinking, well, my boss isn't allowing me to be more intentional about my schedule. And what can you do? When Scott first reached out about this podcast, I thought it was for mine. And so I said, no, not that I would not love to interview you guys for my podcast. I would. Down the road, we will. And in this moment, I'm like, I got to pump the brakes on it for my own emotional well-being. I've noticed that I'm still in a state of rush because my typical day post quarantine is go, right? I'm on a plane at least once a week during our busy time. We're cranking out the podcast. We're doing sales. We're talking to coaches. And so the other day I was sitting on my deck having a morning cup of coffee and I felt a sense of, I got to get to work. And I paused and thought, do I have to get to work right now?
Oh my God, I feel that every day. Yeah, I'm feeling that every day, dude.
And I am not trying to be, we're three, individuals, self-employed or whatever, however it works. Yeah. But I'm not trying to be the naive people saying that you can just take control of your day and at some level find ways that you can have just when you notice it, whether it's change your state, whether it's change your environment, whether it's taking 10 minutes to breathe, whether it's grabbing a cup of coffee, whatever works for you. I don't believe in a one size fits all. I don't think we could write a book and say, do these 10 things and you'll be okay.
Well, I know personally, I share the same thing. Like Scott and I, when we're working, we'll walk probably 3 to 5 miles a day training clients. Sure. And we're constantly moving, constantly engaging. Not always like high energy, but a good portion of the time where, we're engaged in some good conversation. We're pushing through people through workouts. It's very stimulating. And the hardest transition for me is that it's very quiet now. It's silent. So you say state change, that's usually what works for me. When I feel myself getting into that lull, say, go outside, go for a walk, get moving, do some walking lunges, do some push-ups. Just change your physical state first, and usually the mental state gets better, gets kicked up.
And usually you don't want to do it, right? It's the same reason people don't want to go to the gym, but after the gym, you're happy you did and you feel better, right? You've heard it 1,000 times. The same is true for getting outside, going for a walk. I've heard the numbers of 20. If you go for a 20-minute walk, that's what it takes to refresh yourself. Is 20-minute walk.
I did it the other day. I listened to your podcast. It was great.
There you go.
Yeah.
The numbers on how full is your bucket is 5 to 8 positive interactions for every 1 negative is status quo. 8, or maybe it's 3 to 5. 3 to 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative is status quo. 5 to 8 is you're in a place of thriving. So think of it that way. 5 to 8 things that fill your bucket versus the 1 thing that drains it. Right now, there might be a lot more things that drain your bucket, and draining your bucket isn't bad. Kids can be a drain from your bucket. Hopefully overall they're a filler for you if you're a parent, and they can be a drain, and maybe a bigger drain now that you're homeschooling them. Maybe work is a drain. It doesn't mean you hate your job. It can be a drain. Zoom, like I said, it's a weird dynamic that I love these, and at the same time I hate these. Yeah. And so it's like, yes, the cognitive dissonance is probably a drain. So be aware of that, of making sure you're in that 5 to 8 range.
Well, you know what? I do hope that even though you're not a major fan of Zoom, I hope this podcast can even just help you kind of get back into that realm, because you are such a good speaker and good at what you do.
Dude, I think just, and if a guest of my podcast is listening, this is nothing against you, but I think the fact that I'm not running this is cool too.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
It's always good, right? I think that's definitely a good spot to kind of cut it, and we've covered a lot of ground here when it comes to, and it's funny that, you know, the last 2 podcasts now we're kind of getting into the talk about mental health, and kind of a lot of behavioral change, or a lot of any sort of change, requires psychology and requires you to figure out what those triggers are and what those states are that help you and that bring you down. And you know, we need to, you know, put it out there so that other people can listen and say, you know, that is me. I also feel those things, and let me try this other thing that they just said, because I've never done that. And that I think that's the real reason why we have created this podcast, is because we want those people to say, you know, there are a ton of takeaways in this podcast. I'm going to do a few of those. And for you, Bobby, I think you have given us and given our viewers or our listeners tons of takeaways, and we really appreciate that.
I appreciate being on. I'm grateful you asked. I think it's awesome you guys are doing this. Knowing you as I do, Scott, I think you're a perfect person to be doing a podcast. And now meeting Ross, awesome kind of dual podcast you're doing. And I'll say this last thing to your point there. I read this morning, a mentor of mine who I follow tweeted that in 2019, he didn't read 1 book. He said, you read that correctly. I didn't read 1 book in 2019. I committed to implementing the tools and strategies that I've already learned at an extraordinary level. Because if I do that, I'm going to grow more than reading more books. And that was really powerful for me to read, because I look up to him, and I look at him as the kind of guy that's like, read a book a month kind of thing. Sure. And it was powerful to say, and step back, take a few things and do those few things at an extraordinary level and see where that takes you.
With intent, for sure.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Bobby, so much. This was an incredible podcast. Like Scott said, we learned a lot, and we have many takeaways. So I'm looking forward to listening to this again, because I always take a lot of notes during the podcast. I'm going to go back with you. And, you know, it's so interesting. Scott, maybe you can back me up on this. As we talk to more people, such interesting people that have so much to offer, I'm always trying to think of this as like, how can I be a better coach? What can I learn to apply to my clients? But find myself saying,
I know what you're about to say.
That's really good. I think I need to do this. I need to listen again for myself.
Yeah.
Because I think it all does start when you're a good coach. You have to implement everything on yourself first, and then you can feed it to your clients, right?
100%.
You can coach it to your clients.
100%.
So,
I think that, again, going back to vulnerability too, like too many people put other people on a pedestal, and the more that and it sounds like we're putting ourselves on an arrogant pedestal to be like, well, we can knock ourselves, but like you are in the business of coaching fitness. I'm in the business of coaching performance and culture. And so that's why I try to say all the time, that fight with my wife was 2 days ago. That moment of feeling like I'm rushed was yesterday. Like it's like,
it happens. Yeah.
It's not perfect, right? Like just keep doing your best.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. So one last thing, Bobby, give your little plug. Where can people find you?
Absolutely. So the podcast is 50 Cups of Coffee with Bobby Audley. It's on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and SoundCloud. And I'm on all the social medias, Bobby Audley. And then our organization is PenneauTrainingGroup.com. So it's PENNEAU traininggroup.com. And that's where you can find all the, team trainings we do, the keynotes, the workshops, kind of the in-person type stuff is on there.
Absolutely amazing. And we thank all the listeners for tuning in. This is the Sweaty Health Podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Take a screenshot it, share it on your story, tag the Sweaty Health. We really appreciate you guys, and we appreciate Bobby. Thank you, and have a great time.